Welcome to our Emerson Group monthly wealth call for May 2023. My name is Nick Emerson, owner and operator of the Emerson Group, real estate professionals, where we specialize in representing income property owners and utilizing the 1031 exchange strategy to buy, sell, and invest in real estate. Today's call is on the highly contested topic of the newest Tenant Protection Act passed by the City of San Diego and Congress as of April 25th and formally amended and finalized as of May 16th of this month. Our goal today is to better understand what this act looks like and how it will impact you as a landlord. A quick acknowledgement that we've summarized some of the sections to focus on the most important parts of the provisions, and that there also is additional verbiage. So for that, we will be providing a copy of the full passed bill along with this call, so that you can enjoy that at your leisure for any clarifications. Secondly, if you have any questions from this, please message us or call us. We're happy to answer any questions or clarify things, or even connect with the city if necessary. So without further ado, let's get started. Quick overview. What is the Tenant Protection Act? Who does this impact? The overview of the different provisions associated with, the most important ones. And then what are the financial impacts to landlords because of the new changes here with this recent Tenant Protection Act? To start, let's set the stage by getting a sense of where the city's coming from as far as what the problem is and how they're trying to address it with this latest act. So the city is facing a problem based on evictions leading to more homelessness, right? Evictions in San Diego are increasing and are currently at 5 years high, which correlates with an increase in homelessness. In 2019, AB 1482 was passed to help alleviate some of this and put in new protections for tenants across the state. Now, the intention of the Tenant Protection Act was to double down on AB 1482 and implement new provisions that are stricter than the guidelines that the city can enforce. So understand the groundwork for this was really laid in 2019 when they passed this for AB 1482 to expand on it and provide more rights and protections for tenants. A quick timeline of the ordinance and how they were passed, as a lot has happened in the past 4 or 5 years. So in 2019, as I mentioned, AB 1482 was passed by the state of California. This was known as the Tenant Protection Act, but labeled as the Assembly Bill 1482. This did include increases to rent would be capped. So it would be for San Diego 5% plus the consumer price index, not to exceed 10%. Then in 2020, naturally, we had the COVID moratoriums so that we could not issue or move forward any at-fault or no-fault evictions, which was then released as of 2022. And now, as of this year, here we are, 2023, where the Tenant Protection Act was passed in April and then formally amended in May. So that's a kind of quick understanding of where we've come from and how we arrived at where we are today with this tenant protection. Now, who does this impact? Well, it impacts primarily owners that have multifamily or more than one dwelling unit on a parcel, right? So real estate property owners owning multifamily, a duplex, triplex, quadplex, apartment buildings that are not owner occupying one of the units. So this also impacts rental property owners who hold the property in a real estate investment trust, corporation, or LLC. So in essence, the city is making certain they're going after some of the larger parties and institutions that are buying and transitioning large apartment buildings and complexes. Also, ADU owners, if you're renting out the main house in addition to the ADU, this would be something you would fall under for the Tenant Protection Act. Now, For clarification, one thing I wanted to make sure I really harp on here is the definition that they've written into the provision. All right, I want to make sure really focusing on that. Any residential rental property that is alienable separate from title to any other dwelling unit, provided that the landlord is not held in a real estate investment trust, corporation, LLC, and the tenants have been provided notice to the property, is exempt. So, in essence, if you own a single family residence as a rental property, you are exempt. If you have any other dwelling units on that same parcel, you are not exempt. So again, if you live in your primary residence and you rent out an ADU, you are exempt. If you have a duplex where both sides are rented, you are not exempt. The intention of the higher per capita, lower per capita statement is really who is this going to impact, and then who is it really going to impact as far as this is not a conversation for you, right? Single family residence owners occupied by the owner, you're exempt. So understand, if you own several detached homes as rentals, based on the way this code is written, you are not included in this Tenant Protection Act. You are exempt. I indicated other examples of people that are exempt: transient hotels, tourists, short-term rentals, affordable housing. Also, something of note, any housing that was issued a certificate of occupants within the last 15 years. So in essence, if you tear something down, build new construction, you are exempt from this, even if there are multiple units on the parcel. So a question you might ask yourself is, how might this change the way developers and investors go about their business as far as buying, selling, or building? Naturally, a lot of people are going to be gravitating towards ways in which they can remain exempt from this act. Okay, let's go into the overview of these new provisions that are within the Tenant Protection Act. The first thing I want to go over is what are the real meat and potatoes of this new act, right? So we're calling it the Big Five, the most impactful part of the provisions. So first and foremost, new notice requirements, timelines, explanations, and responsibilities to the City Commission for recording. So what this act will do for those that are included in it is that you're going to be required to provide several more notices and opportunities for tenants to correct things and improve things, more time for them to make corrective action. You're going to need to provide more detailed explanations to the tenants, and you're also going to be expected to update the City Commission's website so they can start tracking at fault just cause and no fault just cause, and better understand the migration of evictions and how that might be leading to more homelessness and other policies or changes that might need to be made. So understand though that there are still some timelines as far as when you need to provide notice to, as far as you are exempt or not exempt from the tenant protection. We are still waiting for those to come from the city, and we will be sure to provide those to you. But as it stands right now, beginning January 1st, 2024, every lease that gets put together will be provided to provide the new Tenant Protection Act information, along with a guideline package for tenants so that they can better understand and get educated on what they're entitled to or not entitled to based on the property and the act. The second thing is the tenant rights start day one of occupancy. Well, what does that mean? What that means is that if you fall under the Tenant Protection Act and you have a tenant move into your property, they are entitled to receive rental relocation, 30 to 60-day notices, and go through the entire process of explaining why you'll be noticing them to vacate, providing them up to 2 months of gross rent, and A full list of items will be provided along with this, but understand that ultimately you need to be that much more intentional and mindful of who you are having as tenants in your properties, as it will not be as easy as vacating with a simple 3-day notice. The other thing is the no fault just cause. So the purposes for why you can vacate a tenant, and then what are the associated notices and timing that you need to abide by. We'll go through the owner's relocation assistance obligations, right? So how much must you pay out and under what circumstance? And then lastly, the first right of refusal for up to 5 years for tenants. So let's expand on that in the following slides for each one of these. The notice of tenant and tenant protections. So a landlord of residential real property subject to the division shall provide written notice in 12-point font, not 10, not 14, but 12-point font to the tenant that states the following, right? So this is a notice that needs to be provided to your tenants, whether you are or are not exempt from the Tenant Protection Act. Additionally, as I mentioned before, you're also going to be providing them with your tenant protection guide, which will be available through the commission website. As soon as that is available, we'll be sure to provide a copy of that. Lastly, additional stipulations exist for all properties serving existing tenants. So however benchmarks when they're required to be sent have yet to be released. So we'll update you guys on this, but I wanted to provide an example of what this looks like. For a tenancy and a residential rental property subject to this division, they're still figuring out when they want to apply this to. And then secondly, when they need to be providing an addendum with at least 90 days notice of these new stipulations. So I think one of these is you need to provide notice whether you're exempt or not. And then secondly, understand there's additional timelines and requirements of what you'll need to provide to existing leases and future leases, yet the timeline or dates for these have yet to be applied. So stay tuned. What is at fault just cause? Well, I've listed some of the reasons that are most prevalent for an at fault just cause. A default in payment of rent, a breach of material term of the lease, maintaining, committing, or permitting the maintenance of commission of a nuisance, tenant refusal to execute a written extension or renewal of the lease, criminal activity by a tenant or a criminal threat, tenant assignment or sublet of property in violation of the lease terms. So unless it was written into that you can sublet, you are in violation. Tenant refusal to allow landlord to enter the property. Now, understand it's not going to be as easy as they won't let you in, so you're going to notice a tenant to vacate, naturally, but this does give you the initial right to start and initiate the at fault just cause eviction process. And then lastly, tenant's use of property for an unlawful purpose. So these are the requirements for issuing a termination of tenancy when you're within the at fault just cause, right? So if you're within some of the reasons we just mentioned, this will be the requirements of how you'll be needing to notify the tenant and the applicable action. So prior to issuing this notice for a tenant to vacate for an at fault, you need to give them an opportunity to cure the lease violation. Right, so issuing a written notice of violation, including a description of what it was, and then an opportunity for them to correct it, if possible, within 7 days. Additionally, a notice needs to be provided to the commission of your intention to terminate the tenancy and the reason for it. Third, you need to issue a formal notice to cure or quit if the issue has not been cured within the 7 days initially. After those things have been done, right, you've issued the notice to violate and cure, the notice to the commission, and also an additional notice to quit. The last thing is you formally issue a notice of termination, right, an at fault just cause, which provides them typically 30 to 60 days to vacate the property, and a full explanation of why they are at fault just cause for the eviction. So as you can see, there's several steps that are going to be involved in this. And one thing I want to point out is there's a lot of ways now in which a landlord could get tripped up and maybe no longer qualify for this right because they didn't do it in the precise order or timeline that the city's requiring. Next, we're going to look at no fault, just cause. What are the reasons where you can issue a tenant to vacate where they're not in violation of their lease? First and foremost, the landlord seeks to take possession back of the property, meaning they're looking to move into the property themselves, or their partner, their child, grandchild, parent, or grandparent. All are reasons for you to be able to issue notice to vacate tenants for them to move in. Another common one that we deal with, of course, is withdrawing the property from the rental market. So we're looking to accomplish a sale of the property. The biggest difference is going to be for us is that in the past, we were able to issue notice to vacate 60 days that we're selling the property, and it's as simple as that. Tenant vacates, we move forward with the sale. In this instance, provided you're within the Tenant Protection Act, non-exempt, you will now be required to provide the tenant 2 months of gross rent. So we'll go through the more stipulations of how that works, but understand that naturally this means that landlords are going to be absorbing more costs when it comes time to vacate tenants for the purpose of a sale, for moving into it, or even for the purpose of conducting work at the property. Right, and then say that because understand these costs have to come out somewhere, right? Landlords are not going to incur all these additional costs and not see it show up somewhere else as far as how they're going to lose money and what this might look like on the sale side. Third option, landlord wants to recover possession to comply with an order issued by the government or agency relating to habitability, safety, and they must vacate the property to cure the issue that will require up to 30 days of work, at least rather 30 days of work. Any type of work that's less than 30 days will not be a reasonable, no fault, just cause reason. The fourth reason is an order issued by the government to vacate the property, or a local ordinance that requires vacating the residential property. So naturally, the government required ones are not going to be very common. I think what we really want to pay attention to is the top three here, which is they seek to move into the property, they want to withdraw for the purpose of selling, or the landlord's looking to recover possession so that they can conduct substantial remodel or demolition of the property. No fault, just cause requirements on termination of tenancy. So no fault, just cause, we talked about what would be the reasons for that. Well, the top three reasons being selling it, moving into, or doing repairs. The first item going to be required is issuing the tenant typically a 60 days prior to the proposed date of termination. A issue needs to be included with a description of what the basis for determination is. And then as mentioned, it needs to be also notified to the commission for that reason as well for tracking purposes. Next thing is you're going to issue the right of relocation assistance to the tenant by either direct payment or rent voucher. So in most cases, this will be by a direct payment. The state payment amount needs to be issued within 15 days of notice. So one nuance that's changed here is that in the past, the relocation assistance was awarded after the tenant had officially moved out. In this instance, the state and the city are requiring that the relocation assistance is issued prior to the tenant vacating. So within 15 days of the notice, that will be provided to the tenant. No fault, just cause. So demolition or substantially remodel, right? This is going to be a big one as a lot of clients have typically use this to make sure they can improve the property, but also accomplish a sale. So accomplish both improving the property for the purpose of a sale and initiating the sale. So one of the fascinating things about this is that it incorporates making certain that you're getting the appropriate permits with the city. So for this process, first thing you need to do if your intention is to issue a no fault just cause for the purpose of demolish or substantially remodel is that you'll need to post an application at the rental property with the necessary permits within 3 days of submitting an application to the city. So first step, identify the permits that will be needed to conduct the substantial remodel or the demolition. Post those at your rental property within 3 days of submitting the application. Secure the necessary permits for the demolition or substantial remodel, meaning get them approved, which in this case typically is taking anywhere from 3 to 6 months, if not more. Then after you've obtained the approval, you're going to serve a copy of the permits with a written termination notice certified under the penalty of perjury, stating the reason for termination, the type and scope of work to be performed, why the work cannot be accomplished in a safe manner with the tenants in place, and why the work requires at least 30 days to accomplish. So a couple quick clarifications. A substantial remodel includes, for the definition of the city, the replacement or substantial modification of any structural, electrical, plumbing, or mechanical system that requires a government agency permit. Does not include cosmetic improvements alone, such as painting, decorating, light fixtures, poles, knobs, exterior updates, landscaping, or other work that could be performed without having the property vacated for at least 30 days. So as you can see, if an owner is interested in improving their property after many, many years of being deferred, there's going to have to be a very high level of motivation for them to want to maintain their property and also pay the permits and go through the process, which could take upwards of a year. Secondly, I want to get into the rental relocation assistance, right? So what does this look like? Well, we talked about 2 to 3 months. What's the difference? Well, 2 months is going to be the standard rent relocation fee for any tenant, regardless of the tenant's income or length of tenancy. So in an instance where you have a tenant who is month to month, they move into the property, they're there for 90 days, and you are able to serve them with a 30-day notice, as it's underneath 12 months. You will then be required to provide them with 2 months worth of rent. So much different than the current situation where there's no requirement for relocation assistance and merely a 30-day notice is required. Secondly, the 3-month relocation fee and who applies for that. Well, this is going to be associated for seniors, disabled, or really anyone of the age of 62 years or older. So in that instance, the landlord will be required to provide 3 months worth of rental relocation. So at face value, seems to make sense from a smaller standpoint. Maybe you're trying to relocate 1 or 2 tenants. However, the situation that is really fascinating is, what does this look like for someone who has 4 units to vacate or 6 units to vacate, and you're paying 2 to 3 months of relocation for each one of those units? This could turn into a substantial cost and have a profound impact on the way in which properties will be sold, the condition they'll be sold in, the price that they will obtain. And ultimately, a lot more money is going to come out in the form of landlords' pockets through this. So if you've got great tenants and your place is in great condition, kudos to you. You're probably not going to feel a lot of what we're talking about right now. Yet, if you're in a situation where you have tenants that are paying below market, the units need work because they haven't been updated or touched in many, many years, things can get a lot more time consuming and obligated for you as a landlord if you're looking to make any changes. And naturally, there's a case that a lot of landlords just simply will not maintain their properties because the level of motivation, the cost, and the amount of time and energy needed to accomplish that does not outweigh their benefit in their mind of doing the repairs in the first place. First right of refusal for up to 5 years. So I just wanted to quickly clarify on this as well. So when you're issuing a tenant at no fault, just cause reason for termination, you'll also be required to provide a notice that they can accept that provides them the first right of refusal for your property. Meaning, if you vacate a tenant, let's say you do substantial repairs, or maybe you move into the property for a couple of years. If that property comes back on the rental market within 5 years, and the tenant decides to sign the first right of refusal, they will have the opportunity to rent that property from you first. Now, understand that the rent rate will still be at market based on when you put the home back on the rental market. Yet, this does give another option for a tenant to come back to your unit. And quite frankly, we'll see if this has any real impact at all, as it sounds scary, yet I'm not quite sure how many people would be in a situation where they'd be returning back to the unit, especially if it's after a longer period of time. Financial impacts to landlords. So what does all this mean for you if you're a landlord and you are in fact not exempt from this Tenant Protection Act? Caps on profitability. So naturally, through the conversation we've had today, there's many different steps that are going to be included into this process, whether it's at fault, not at fault. You're going to be dealing with likely a higher increase in property management fees. As a property management company, you're going to be required to issue many more notices. So that means several more trips to the property, more explanation to both the tenant in the form of writing and the commission. So as you can see, there's a lot more time and energy that needs to be focused on this when you're dealing with a situation underneath the Tenant Protection Act. That's going to increase the cost of management fees. That's going to increase the amount of time and energy you as a landlord need to manage your property if you're dealing direct. The cost of permitting to get repairs done, right? Let's face it, a lot of us are not going to the city because we want to replace a light fixture or replace a can light or a plumbing component. So understand there's going to be a lot more cost in that department. And then as far as the sale of properties go, right? Vacating your tenants, conducting pre-market repairs may no longer be a simple yes anymore, right? That's a strategy we are always recommending. And yet, if you need to go through this process to notice your tenants, provide them with rental relocation, right? And everything that comes with that, there's a higher likelihood people are going to be more inclined to simply sell the property as is with tenants in place and let the new person take over the burden of that. And for taking over that burden, naturally, people are going to pay lower prices. So this is going to have a lot of interesting implications. And naturally, we have only history to tell us what that looks like. So keep in mind, we'll continue to monitor this and see how that plays out. But naturally, profitability as a landlord is going to go downward based on the pressures from all the time, energy, and extra money spent on this. Other thing is stuck with bad tenants. If you have a tenant that's a pain in the butt, it's going to be that much more challenging to get them out of your property because you're going to have to go through more steps. There's more likelihood of a hiccup or maybe an oversight. And because of that, some people may choose to just simply deal with it. Lastly, as I talked about, increase in operating expenses, right? So yeah, you're gonna be less profitable and your operating expenses are going to go up. There's been a lot of studies done in several cities, San Francisco, New York, that have had similar tenant protection acts passed. And yet we can't use their situation or findings as exact for how it will play out in San Diego, as they all have different nuances with rental caps and stipulations. But the prevailing information is that this will in fact cause property values to likely soften from an investor standpoint, as there's going to be more burdens and time and energy associated with buying and selling this type of asset. So understand that this is going to come at a cost, provided you're under the Tenant Protection Act and are owning properties that fit in this space. I want to do a quick overview of what the permit costs are from the city of San Diego, just to give you guys a sense of what it looks like to apply for a permit fee in any one category here. So as you can see, these are pretty standard permit fees here as far as electrical goes, plumbing, mechanical. So add these up over the course of a project, and what we're looking at is $850 here, $100 there, $585, $1,500, $300 for inspections. We're looking at a total cost that's going to likely exceed, $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 for a standard project. And that's not even including if you're doing a substantial, right? Which in this case, you'd have to use this for a notice to vacate. So understand that your cost in your project, if you're applying this to one unit or multiple units, right? We're talking about a $4,000 to $5,000 cost for a door. And yet, if you're vacating 3 or 4 units for your property, going through this process, that's a substantial increase. We're talking about having gone from maybe 0 permit costs to in excess of $20,000 in that instance. That's going to have to feel out somewhere as far as either not doing it, so we have more deferred properties that need work and have issues, or people that are ultimately not going to sell the property after they renovate it because they can't justify getting the return on it. So they're going to continue to hold the property. There's a lot of possible implications that might come from this, but the main thing we wanted to impress upon you is simply there's other additional costs that are going to come up because of this, in excess of the rental relocation, the additional time and money spent to follow the rules or to hire someone to follow the rules for you. How can we help? So just a real quick recap, including this call for the Tenant Protection Act, we will make certain that you do get a full, complete copy of the ordinance passed. We will update you on any additional timelines or information that does come from this. And if you have questions about your specific situation or how this might impact you, please email us, message us from our website, or call me. I have this information available for you. Other ways we can help, we can schedule a call, as I said, submit questions, conduct a free asset performance test for your rental property to see how you're performing today versus the rest of the market. Request for property management services, or maybe a free rental market evaluation of what your current rent might be in today's market. Or if you're interested in checking out our past calls or upcoming ones, as we conduct wealth educational calls every month here at the Emerson Group. So outside of that, I want to thank you guys for your commitment of time to access this information and education on the Tenant Protection Act. And if for any reason you have any questions or anything I can do to help expand on this, please reach out, and we wish you and yours an awesome wealth journey ahead. Take care.